It's essentially the simplest and most effective mouse mod I have used to date. And I want to talk to you a little bit today about my experience with these. Struth has his own video guidance on what this ClawMate is and how to use it. So I'll link all of that stuff in the description down below. What I'm going to do today is tell you my experience with it. So I am going to miss out some really key details. If you want those details, go and check out Struth's video in the description. So my initial impressions of this modification were not that positive. So the issue I had with this modification initially was that I basically chucked them on my GPX without looking at any of the guidance. And I ended up basically thinking that I had to use it like this. So I kind of assumed I would use the angles of the modification to replace the shape of my mouse. And while what I can say for this implementation or for this use case of the modification is that it feels super locked in. You know, I've never had a mouse create this much pressure into my palm before with the way I'm pulling back on it. So it's completely effortless in how I hold it. But I didn't like that myself because as a person that is an enthusiast of mouse shapes and mouse designs, this kind of invalidates all of those sort of elements that I enjoy talking about because it does just kind of flat out replace the shape of the mouse. And it kind of felt a little bit, I don't know, maybe impersonal in a way. It felt like I was using the mouse as a tool rather than it being like an object that I have this sort of connection with, which sounds really weird saying it out loud, but hopefully you can understand what I mean. So I put this down with those ClawMates on, I kind of chucked it to the side and I didn't touch it again for a long time because I felt like I didn't want to use the ClawMates in that way. So instead I reached out to Struth and I asked him for some advice. So I said, Struth, what am I doing wrong? I don't get it. And he basically corrected me in the way that these things are intended to be used. So I haven't used them necessarily the way that he describes in his response to me. But the way I was using them was to flat out replace the shape of your mouse. So I was kind of relying on those elements to kind of hold my finger entirely and there was no contact with the mouse with my fingertips. What Struth sort of intended for these to be used for is to just kind of seamlessly butt up against the side of the mouse and then your finger uses that sort of space or that friction that it creates or that angle to better hold your finger in place without it moving around. You know, so his intention wasn't that it would replace it, so I wouldn't be using it with my finger on it like this. I would be using my finger on the side of the mouse, and this little nugget here will just create a little bit of extra angle to prevent my finger from slipping. So I looked at a little bit more of his guidance. I went through his video, his user guide and so on, and I've settled on an approach which, for me, it works perfectly fine. I don't think I need anything else from these mods, although there is much more to gain from them. I typically use them like this. So on the G303 many moons ago, I used to main this mouse and I loved it. I really enjoyed this mouse, but I found the major issue I had on it, which made me move away from it, was that my pinky kind of just slid around on this right-hand side because there isn't really a coating on it. It's just kind of plastic and the edges are so sharp that there was nothing really to grip onto. So ultimately, I moved away from this mouse, I bought a different mouse, and now I've got millions of mice. But the implementation of this ClawMate that I like on the mice that I use it for is to, basically what I do is I just put my finger in the position I want to hold the mouse. I butt the sharp edge of the ClawMate up against my finger. I apply a little bit of pressure. And then that's it installed, that's it doing exactly what I need it to do. And what this does, instead of it replacing the shape of the mouse, which is what I didn't like about the previous implementation that I tried on the GPX, it just prevents my finger from moving when I don't want it to. And it basically gives it a reference point or like a roadblock. So when my fingers are sort of half slipping around, it doesn't ever go past the point that I've defined on the side of the mouse. And I'm not like pulling back into this modification. All I'm doing is allowing my finger to press up against it, and I'm still gripping the side of the mouse, but it is so much more comfortable having this here because I don't have to apply so much pressure and like squeezing the mouse in my finger to my finger and my thumb. I can kind of rely on this modification to take some of that stress out of my grip. It's really, really nice. So I've been starting to use the G303 again as a result of this modification. I do want to talk about another implementation that I found on the Zalpin. So in a previous review of the Orochi, I basically commented that my finger slipped, similar issue really, kept slipping off the right-hand side of the mouse. And I put this little point on this side of the Orochi, and it does the same function as I've described on the G303. So I don't have to worry about this mouse slipping out of my grip now when I'm in a gunfight and things are getting tense, my fingers are getting sweaty. I haven't had to put grip tape on because I've got these little reference points in the way. And I prefer to feel the shape of the mouse without grip tape if I can. Not that there's any issue with grip tape, but these little things are so useful, and there's a few different sort of elements to it. So not only does it kind of stop my finger from slipping past the point that I want it to, as I've mentioned with the G303, it allows you to hold your mice with a little bit less tension in your grip, and it's an overall much more relaxed experience in your grip. And I personally think that is so valuable, because when I grip this mouse without these ClawMates on, it feels completely different to when I grip them with the ClawMates on. I think these ClawMates, for the very simple application that I've used them for, are incredibly valuable, and I can't think of any reason why more people aren't talking about it, other than that they just think they look a little bit goofy and haven't given them a chance. So on this side of the mouse, just a very quick description as to why I've put this here. So the Zalpin coating, although it kind of has a coating, it's not very good. And I didn't want my thumb to slip past the buttons, which sometimes happens when I'm playing in Fingertip. So I just butted it up against where I wanted my thumb to go. And now I don't even have to think about it. I can just kind of roll my thumb around on that side of the mouse. Don't ever have to worry about it slipping out of my grip. So one thing I would say, if you're going to do this on other mice, is this is quite a tall modification. So if you're going to stick it in front of the button, say if you wanted your grip to be back here, if you stuck a ClawMate here, let me just show you. Then when it comes to actually activating the buttons, you kind of have to navigate the ClawMate. So it's not going to work on every mouse, and I don't do this specific thumb placement on all my mice, but on the Zalpin it works really well because of the size of it. And then finally, another fingertip mouse, I just kind of wanted to demonstrate it on the OP1WE. I find that I have no issues gripping this mouse without the ClawMate, but to go back to the point I've already mentioned, my grip feels a lot more relaxed with the ClawMate. So I wish I could put a ClawMate on this side. I might just have to put a little scrap of grip tape here instead of a ClawMate though, because for the reason I described on the Zalpin, if I put a ClawMate here, which is where I want to grip it, I can't then actuate the buttons easily because the ClawMate gets in the way. But on this side, I've just basically put the ClawMates where I want my fingers to rest and where I want it to basically get all the movement from in my fingers, and it feels great. I don't have to apply too much pressure to the mouse. As I keep saying, it feels really nice in use, and I think this is wildly underrated. So while I'm here talking about the OP1WE, I've used two different tapes here, and you get these tapes in the pack, and you get a really thin tape as an option, and that tape is more designed for like a seamless connection with the mouse. So the thinner tape clearly has less of a depth to it, so therefore it is much closer to the surface of the mouse, the different angles. It's also less resilient to like re-sticking, pulling it off and sticking it back on, whereas the thicker tape, which is the one I prefer to use, is way thicker, it's way stickier, way more resilient to dust and sticking and unsticking. And I've maybe stuck and unstuck these sort of 10 or so times before they run out of stick. And at the point they run out of stick, I just cut out another square. So there's no issue there at all in terms of the adhesive running out, because you can just peel it off and stick on a new one. I'll just show you that. So the construction of this modification is so simple. You get like a bag of these little things, you get 8 in a pack. You get loads of tape, you just cut the tape to the size, you stick it on the spacer, and then you stick the spacer on the side of the mouse. Doesn't get much more simple than that. And the reason I like this mouse modification so much is because of that simplicity. And another thing I wanted to cover is where I keep my ClawMates when I'm not using them. And this is my light bar switch. So I can turn my light bar on and off with this remote. And I kind of just stick them to the top of this light switch because the tape is so resistant to dust, etc. And I have so much of it that if I run out, I can just cut a new piece. It doesn't matter where I stick it, but this is a really convenient place for me. When I pick up a mouse that needs some help in terms of making it comfortable for me, I'll just pull one off, stick it on the side of the mouse, Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. So I want to compare it now to the SoSpacers, and I don't actually have any here to compare it to directly as I talk, but I have had some in the past, and I got so frustrated with the SoSpacers by comparison because they were so fiddly, and the shape of the SoSpacer was harder to apply in a way that was meaningful on the mouse. At least for me, that was the case. The SoSpacer also had the adhesive applied at the point of manufacture, so you can't replace the adhesive because it doesn't come off in a uniform way, and the shape of the SoSpacer is so awkward that it becomes too difficult to do. And effectively, what I ended up doing with the SoSpacers that I bought 6 SoSpacers, I think for about £12, which felt like I'd been mugged off when they'd arrived. I thought I'd get more. Basically, I stuck them all on the side of this mouse. I stuck them where my thumb would go, just to hold my thumb in place. I stuck them where my finger would go, and this finger would go. And I didn't like them at all. Basically, I ended up having to stick them off and stick them back on again so many times, they lost their stick, and then I had to just chuck them in the bin because they were useless. What I like about these, by comparison, is they offer you more of a ledge to put your finger up against. It becomes like a more meaningful connection than just like a resting point, which essentially I found to be a little bit underwhelming on the SoSpacers. They were a bit of a, a wet noodle to me on arrival, unfortunately. Despite lots of people liking them, I personally didn't vibe with them. So these are a lot more impactful on your mouse when you put them in the right places, which is why I rate these a lot higher, and I do actually use them. So there's a few different use cases for these modifications. I think there's the main one that I would recognize is just the way that I've described it. So you can basically just make a mouse work for you that previously didn't work necessarily. So you might have a mouse in your closet or something, on a shelf somewhere that you previously really liked for all but one reason. And there's a good chance, if that's a grip related issue, that these modifications will help you overcome that issue and you'll be able to enjoy that mouse again. And then another use case for these modifications is if you can't find a mouse that works for you and you're struggling, you spent a load of money and you're struggling to find one that works and you're getting a little bit frustrated, you can just use one that you have and you can add these modifications to them in places where your grip is struggling or you're not comfortable. And ultimately, if you follow the guidance that Struth has provided and you look and you engage with the community around these modifications, because there is a community there, they're really engaged and they would probably love to help you, then I'm pretty confident you could make any mouse work for you, provided it's roughly the right size, roughly the right shape. These modifications will fill in those gaps for you if you aren't an enthusiast for shapes. So personally, I prefer shapes than I do relying on modifications, but these mods, in my use case, are just a nice supplement to the shape. They don't replace it, they just help me grip it with less tension in my grip. And it's actually a really good investment because these little silicone squares and triangles will never go anywhere. They're not going to break down or wear out over time. The only thing that's going to wear out is the tape, and you can just buy more from your local hardware store. So I think these are really good. I think for the sake of £20, you find yourself with a much more relaxed grip with your mice, and you can basically reduce your grip tape bill. I don't think they'll replace grip tape for you entirely. I think it will significantly reduce how much you need to apply to this side of a mouse, because you can just kind of stick one of these there. And when you finish using a mouse, you can just take it off this one and stick it on the next one. You can't really do that with grip tape. And you certainly can't do that with the SoSpacers, which are the competing product. So Struth was kind enough to send me a couple of these packs for the review, just to show you basically the different colors that you have as options on the website. So you have a white colorway, you have a black colorway, and you have a red colorway. I also bought my own pack many months ago, and that's this one. So I bought mine before Struth sent them out, and I always intended to review them, but he wanted to just have the opportunity to show those different colors in the review. I am also affiliated with Struth, which All of the details for that will be down in the description below. If you want to give these a try, you can use my code, go to the Struth Gaming store, use my code, you get a discount, and I'd be really interested to hear how you get on with these. That's it. Hopefully I've persuaded you that these are a good thing and that they're actually useful. I think some people laugh at them when they see them, but you'll be seeing them crop up on some of my videos in the future. So hopefully that's helped, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace. So I have never liked this mouse shape. It's always been a bit of a struggle for me. There's no sort of really good anchor points on this for my fingers to kind of grip onto, maybe because my hands are too big, but you can see by looking at this implementation of the modification is kind of replacing the mouse shape, because my fingers that are in contact with the mouse normally aren't touching it in the slightest. So I'm only touching the mouse modifications and it feels really locked in. So I could, if I didn't want to buy a new mouse, make do with this implementation of this mod and get use out of this mouse that I've already spent money on. So there's one way I could use this modification. That kind of replaces the mouse shape, gives me some really good anchor points, and it's quite a useful option to have in your arsenal if you don't want to keep spending money on new mice. I will show you another way that we can use them on the GPX. So what I'd maybe do now with my revised approach, using this sharper edge instead. So if I want to supplement the mouse shape instead of just completely almost replace it, is I'd put my finger in positions that felt good on the mouse. So where I would like there to be an anchor point, or for my fingers to sort of stay without sort of slipping around. And I would just butt the modification up to my fingers in those locations. So my fingers are still touching the mouse here. I've got another one up here. Just going to stick that one there. So there's two applied on the side. And then on this side, I'm not sure I need one on this side. I'm going to stick one in anyway, just to show you. So I've gone from basically having no contact with the mouse at all to having really good contact with my thumb to the mouse, and I also have a bit of support from the ClawMate. And on this side, I have contact with the mouse as well, and I have basically created anchor points for my fingers to just rest against. So it allows me on the GPX to have a grip that is comfortable where otherwise I wouldn't have been able to use this mouse. And typically, the thing that I find with the GPX when I use it without these modifications is that I kind of just, I'll just pull them all off a minute. I kind of just lay my hand over the top of it because there's no, I just can't use this mouse in any other way than like this, because it's, there's a reason people call it a potato. With this modification, I can use it in different ways and it feels fun and exciting. Hopefully that's a useful demonstration.